Mr. Happy Living here. I love entrepreneurs and artists and business executives and innovators and people from every walk of life that have discovered their reason for being on this planet. And that's why I love Mark Young. He's an entrepreneur and the CEO of 2 super cool startup companies, and also the chief executive of Zona Health, the company that makes an amazing little device I use almost every day to keep my blood pressure right where it should be. So Mark, welcome to the Something Significant Show.
Well, I appreciate that, Matt. Your very complimentary introduction.
No worries. Hey, tell our viewers and listeners about the exciting things you're doing to leave your mark of significance on the world.
Oh my gosh, I don't know, Matt. That sounds like it sounds like a pretty big question. I don't know. Significance. That's funny you say that because you just made the comment there about what it is why is a person on the planet, where they discover the reason that they're alive, right? And you and I chatted earlier and I gave you some information, but when you said that line, it reminded me, and that as I talk to people about what I refer to, one of my favorite authors is a guy named Bill Hybels. And he actually was the former pastor of a church out in Chicago. And he wrote a book called Holy Discontent. And Holy Discontent is all, are you familiar with it at all?
Nope.
So it's an amazing book. And what he talks about is that there's something about each individual that just bothers them about the world, like something that they're supposed to do, which is uniquely different from anybody else. And he would go on to say that echoes the heart of God, that God put something in you that makes you different from everybody else. And years ago, after reading that, the question came up for me, like, okay, well, what is mine? And for some people, it's, feeding the hungry. For some people, it's, stopping AIDS in Africa kind of stuff. And when I really sat down and figured it out for myself over a long period of time, it was honestly that I hate more than anything else in the world, Matt, watching people live beneath their potential. And every single time I encounter somebody, that's the one thing I want to talk about is like, what are you now that you could be more of? Or how could you be better than where you are? And it's not because I'm a scientist at this. It's because I just can't stand it when people could be so much more and they don't see what the amazing things that could become of them. And I think they're so often, I use the word that they're locked in prisons of their own lies because they don't believe it. So yeah, there you go. There's my elevator speech for you.
Well, good. Well, you're doing what most people could never imagine doing. You're heading 3 companies, 2 of your own startups, and one Zona Plus that's not your startup that you joined. But let's journey back in time, maybe 10 years ago. What were you doing back in 2010?
Well, I'll even go back another 10 years for you there, Matt, and I'll draw a little bit of a timeline and tell you, I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. So you make it sound like I'm this big entrepreneur guy, and I laugh at that a little bit. But I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs, so the idea of self-employment was just always part of what we do. And everybody talks about, they want to own their own business, they want to be their own boss, kind of master of their own destiny. And I wasn't that. That's what's really funny is because I grew up around it, but I always preferred a little bit of safety. And I became an accountant. So I laughingly say that I was an accountant for the early part of my life. I know, right? Makes absolutely no sense. And if you know anything about me, that is the worst job in the world for me. But I was an accountant for years, but I'm too social. I'm too interactive, too extroverted to be an accountant for very long. And I started teaching adjunct at a local college. Okay, now that's where I really found my inspiration. Like I loved it. And I ended up from that point, was an accountant for a while longer, taught adjunct. And when I finally decided I was done being an accountant, remind you, I need security. I was like, well, what is it that I've done in my life that I loved doing more than anything I've done before? And I'm like, man, I love teaching. Like I love doing that. So I found myself teaching full time. And I taught at a couple of colleges and universities back in my hometown in Detroit. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. The problem is that when you're good at business and you understand business and you've got an eye for administration, you don't stay you don't stay at a professor for very long. So I ended up moving up through these ranks. And so 10 years ago, to answer your question, I was working full-time in education. I was a college professor. I was also in administration. So I would run the college. I was the campus president in a few different schools. And then found myself, I'll say 5 years ago, just over 5 years ago, 7 exactly, I was moved down to Fort Lauderdale. So I now am a Floridian, which I appreciate greatly as opposed to Detroit. But so I moved down here because Security for Babies, right? The company that I worked for, it was a $500 million education company. We owned colleges and universities all over the country. I was the senior VP of operations, ended up moving up to a COO role at the company. And 8 months after moving to Florida, quit the job. And that was one of the most unexpected moments of my life. I had spent my life with security. I went to school and earned 100 different college degrees and worked in education and had this big job and, beautiful, beautiful home by the ocean and all this other kind of stuff. And found myself, I left the company. The company just moved in a direction I didn't approve of, and things were just not going the way that it was all promised. And found myself having to start over. And I don't know if you've been there before, Matt, but starting over is never fun.
Yeah. Well, we'll go back to purpose here in just a second, because that's the second part of a major part of significance. But the defining significance, as we do at Happy Living, it contains 4 elements: doing things you love, in places you love, with people you love, and creating something of value for others. So it's doing, but it's also giving. But to be a giver, you need excess capacity in your life. So the question is, take a couple minutes on it. What are your personal practices, physical, mental, spiritual, financial, emotional? What do you do to increase your capacity so you can take care of yourself, Mark Young, and you still have more to give to others?
Sure, and great question. And I think that really boils down to people living balanced lives. Too much of one thing is too much. And I laugh here because I tend to work a lot. But one of the things that I do is I force a discipline of leaving the office. Like there's never enough time to finish all the things I need to finish. But I also know that if I don't leave the office and go to the gym, I'm not going to be happy tomorrow. And again, a happy physical life leads to a more balanced emotional life, which leads to greater capacity for spiritual life, which leads to greater success in relationships. Because if you're a person who's on edge or overburdened or undernourished in some way, everything collapses. And I'm one of those people, I have to tell you, like when things start to unravel and it goes to one thing, then the next thing, then the next thing, like suddenly I'm like curled up in a corner because the laundry's not done, right?
Right.
and at that point, it's take the discipline to stop what you're doing and feed yourself in all of these important ways and not just one. And sometimes for me, it's something as stupid as eat a salad. Because eating a salad, if nothing else, stops me and says, you have control of your health. Or go to the gym. You control your health. Or take a day off, or go to church, or spend time with friends. Even though you've got a to-do list for days, go spend time with people who appreciate you and you appreciate them back, because life's about balance.
100%. You mentioned something that's really important in this discussion about capacity, as you say you work a lot. But if you're doing work you love, it's really not work. We put that word around it, but I know raising my kids in my previous careers, I used to call it playing work. I'm going to go play work now. And so, work can be work, and sometimes you have to do it, but can also be playful, and it can also be, it can give you capacity the more you do it.
It's so funny. I was talking when I mentioned to you before that I had just finished a book recently, and not too long ago, I was on the telephone with my aunt, and she says, well, what are you doing later? And I said, actually, I'm going to go home and write. And she says, you need to stop. You need to take some time. And I'm like, that is my time. Like when I can sit and just write and block out the rest of the world and open my patio door and let a beautiful Florida breeze in while I'm just sitting with a computer on the couch and, putting my thoughts into print, like that to me is inspiring. Like after doing that, I'm not ready to go to bed. Like I'm ready to go up and go do something. Like I'm back. And you're right. When you're doing something you love, it just changes it.
That's good stuff. You're giving me goosebumps. So Mark, let's take a quick commercial break and spread a little love for our awesome sponsors, which happen to be our 2 companies, Zona Plus and Happy Living.
Sounds good.
Mr. Happy Living here. I love good things made by good people. That's why I love Zona Plus, the world's first software-controlled handheld device that improves cardiovascular health. You're going to love it too. I use mine almost every day to keep my blood pressure right where it should be. What surprised me though is this little device has been adding muscle to my biceps too. I walk around all day feeling pumped. Check them out at Zona.com. Use coupon code HAPPY for $50 off. Plus, for every order placed during the month of October, I'll donate another $50 to WYTV7. Okay, we're back, and this is the Something Significant Show, and I'm Matt Gersper. Hey, viewers and listeners, do yourself a big health favor and go buy a Zona Plus right after you finish this show. I love mine, use it every day, and I know you're going to love yours too. But for now, let's get back to my special guest, Mark Young, CEO of Zona Health, the maker of the Zona Plus. So Mark, in my second book, Turning Inspiration into Action, I explore the idea that big transformations and discovery of purpose often come from devastation. A terrible illness, a sudden death, something horrible happens to shake your life. But I've used a happier way and created transformations in my life with inspiration. So my question for you is, was there a specific moment or a situation when either devastation or inspiration revealed to you the purpose you were meant to live?
Oh, those are good questions, Matt, and I almost hate answering them, but I will. I mentioned to you a moment ago that I moved down here to Florida, and I'll give you a little bit more backstory on that and rewind a year before I moved. And that is, I had put my heart and soul into my education and my career. My entire life, this was what I was doing, and my purpose was to grow in that way, so I thought. There was a year, it was actually in 2013 specifically, when I was raised by my grandmother, and she had passed away. My ex and I had broken up. I had a business up in Michigan where I was from that was like a part-time thing, and we sold it. I moved out of my house because I was traveling so much that it made no sense, so I rented out my home. Literally, my entire life in Michigan came to a close in about 3 to 4 months, and none of it was planned. And it was one of those things, and the funny thing is for me, I felt that was going to be my rebirth. Like, I really looked at it as, you know what, these are the things that are leading me to somewhere else. And I was working a lot on the East Coast because I traveled significantly at the time. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to move to New York. Like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to pack up. I'm going to move. I've never left Michigan, to travel, but not to live. And I just decided I was going to do something else. 6 months later, I received this news from the CEO of the company that I was working for. That was the education holding company, saying, we want you down here. And I'm like, oh, okay, like I could talk about that. Like, I have nothing else going on, right? So I ended up moving down to Fort Lauderdale, knowing nothing about the area whatsoever. And when I got here, it was this moment, Matt, that I felt that I'd arrived. As silly as that sounds, like, this was my moment. Like, I was making great money. Everything seemed fantastic, beautiful high rise on the ocean. And it was my moment that I thought it was great. And I'll tell you what, my life was so out of balance because all I did was work. And that was my significance. And I was completely out of balance. 8 months into that arrangement, like I'd explained to you, I moved here to Florida. I'm not even a year here. And I resigned from the position because, all that glitters isn't gold. And I'll be honest with you, I went through the worst midlife crisis that you can imagine, because literally I felt like everything that I had been working for came to a conclusion practically overnight. And it was such a shock. Like, my system just didn't even know how to react to it. And it's funny because that was when I had to bring balance back to my own life. So here I am at this moment that I felt like my entire career collapsed and everything was crazy and whatever. I'm like, I was in the best health of my life because I ate great and I worked out constantly because that's how I kept my wits about me. And I started making some professional moves and taking chances on things. And I told you, I'd always craved security. And I started working on a contract gig, honestly. My father owns a company, and I was like, I'm not working with the family business. That's not going to happen. But what happened was I'm always willing to look for opportunity. And in partnership with a project that he'd been working on, I started my own business and decided I was just going to go do this my own way. And it was so revolutionary for me, because it's one thing to own a side business. It's another thing when you're in charge, and your paychecks are going to be earned based on every move you make. And it is a scary proposition. And if somebody on this recording is watching this, thinking about it, I will tell you, do it. Because statistically, 97% of people who ever are self-employed say they would never go back to the traditional job market. And I'm one of them. And at the same time, I'll tell you, it is scary as hell. Do not look behind you. Just keep running. But yeah, there was that moment that it seemed like everything was ending. And in fact, it was a rebirth. And I thought my rebirth was moving down to Florida and starting this new adventure, when in fact, that was just the last step before the explosion. Like, here I am thinking that was the explosion. And then all of a sudden it all ended. And I'm like, oh no, what just happened? Like, I've lost significance. And I have to tell you, Matt, like, it was in that year in particular, like, I was in great physical health. I was rekindling relationships with people that I hadn't talked to in ages because I was too busy, quote unquote. And it was a great time. And ultimately, I decided that I wanted to stay in Florida, because who wouldn't want to live around palm trees? But it really became a time of forcing myself to make new relationships down here, forcing myself into hobbies, forcing myself into getting to know people and growing my business and traveling and doing the things that I love to do now. And it's incredible, to be honest with you.
Awesome. The road to your absolute best life is often very bumpy and a lot of curves and a lot of things you could never expect.
There is no map.
When you combine capacity with purpose, then the sky's the limit.
Yeah.
So I say capacity plus purpose equals happy. I call that my happy formula. But I believe that the real magic of life comes from the fourth element of significance. So, Mark, what has doing work that creates value for others, how has that brought joy and magic into your life?
Sure. And thank you. I mean, I love that. And the first thing I'll tell you there is, like, my primary career now is actually I own and operate my own marketing agency. And what I love is that I deal all day long now. And while I used to be a teacher in the classroom and working with young people and trying to help mentor them into one good decision at a time, now I end up spending my time working with entrepreneurs, because the people that we deal with most often are folks that are they're lost, honestly. Most of them, they have a great idea. They've got a business plan. They've got an invention. They've got something that they're trying to get launched. And I get them calling, and I spend time on the telephone, and I laugh because Rachel, who works at our office, and she's always getting mad at me going, "You're giving way too much time away to people." And I'm like, I know, but they need it, because I get on the telephone with these folks and they're so lost. They're so lost, and they want it so bad, but they've never met anybody who can actually help mentor them through those hardships. So and by hardship, I mean lack of capital to start their business, whatever. And now I get to do that. Further, I get to work with Zona Plus, which I told you before. Zona Health is a company that I also run, and that's based on a bunch of different craziness. But I was an investor in the company years ago, and ended up taking the reins of the company a couple of years ago. And I do that as well as my other companies. So I'm very busy, no shortage of things to do. Right. And working with the company like Zona, which allows people, and I'll tell you my quick story there is, my blood pressure spiked out of nowhere a couple of years ago. And we talk about how Zona Health helps regulate your blood pressure using isometric therapy. When my blood pressure spiked, I'd never had high blood pressure. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't really know what to do with it. And here I am running a company that controls blood pressure, right? And I started using the device, but my first inclination, I was like, oh man, this is really putting I'm putting my money where my mouth is when I'm doing this, because this is my health I'm talking about now. And when I noticed the significant reduction in my blood pressure, it was like, wow, like this really works. Like this is really something we're doing. And it's getting people away from pharmaceutical dependency and getting them onto a healthier lifestyle. And once a person, I told you sometimes for me, it's like eat the salad because it's the first good decision in a series of good decisions. And when a person makes the choice to use a naturopathic solution like a Zona Plus, it's not only that the Zona Plus works, but then they make the next good decision and the next good decision and the next good decision. It starts to validate the good stuff that they're doing. So if we can be the first step in that, I am all in. Like, I will do anything to help a person make those choices because there's a healthier lifestyle, and healthy brings happy, and all of the other colloquialisms that you can probably spin better than me.
That creates an upward spiral, just like the opposite of a downward spiral. Good stuff, Mark. Good stuff. Well, let's wrap things up with the lightning round. One of my funnest things to do. I'll read one of my very favorite quotes to you, and then you respond to us telling what it means to you. No more than 45 seconds so we can get a few of these in, okay? So quick answer.
This is all improv. Don't
Ready,
judge me.
Set, go. Once you get where you want to be, you're not there anymore.
Agreed, because you're never going to get where you want to be because you always level up your expectations of yourself.
Security is mostly a superstition. It does not exist in nature, Mr. Security Boy.
It's true, and I do not believe that security exists because we always have to live on the edge of something better. Nothing's ever secure.
Good. When worlds collide and experiences form synergy, you have a perfect storm of opportunity. From there we rise.
That's nice. I always say success equals opportunity plus preparation. And the part that people don't do is they don't spend the time in the preparation. They're too busy searching for the opportunity. And if you spend the time preparing for the day the opportunity comes along, it does, because opportunity is everywhere. And I always tell people, like, my answer to everything is yes, and then I'll figure it out later, because I usually do. And at the same time, why would I say no?
Yeah.
Like,
opportunity is everywhere, and I think a big trick is to find out which of them is the right one for you.
Agreed.
When you find that, then you got magic. Great. It's good to have an end to journey toward, but it's a journey that matters in the end.
One of my favorite quotes, I'm going to fire back in response to that success is not a destination, it's a journey. And again, it's that idea that I believe in milestones, and along the way, we need to celebrate those victories and build those monuments to remember where we've come from. But at the same time, we never stop moving in the forward direction. And if you get to where you thought you should be, then you clearly didn't dream big enough. Like, go move the goal, move the goalpost. There's always somewhere to go. I was asked recently, so when do you plan to retire? And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? What? Why would I do that?
It's a silly notion that we've brought into our life, and that's good on you. I'm significantly older than you are, I can tell from this conversation. But the other thing that happens is who you are changes over time. So there's different things for you to do, and so good. Those are great answers. Okay, your day belongs to another's dream.
That's an interesting quote. I've never heard that before. Your day belongs to another's dream. Well, I don't know what to say to that one, to be honest with you. I'll say that to me, it sounds like, your bad day is somebody's dream day, that somebody would love to have the bad day you're having because you've never experienced how bad theirs is, that all things are relative.
Yep, that's it. Gratitude. Okay, last one. Whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now.
Oh my gosh. This is funny you say this. Just the other day, I was reading a Facebook memory. And a friend of mine, coincidentally enough, his birthday was yesterday. So it was a post that was about that. And he and I always use this phrase, when faced with two equal decisions, choose the bolder. And it was the idea that if there are two things that you could follow either one of those paths, just choose the bolder.
What's it, the path less trodden? Or
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Mark. Well, this has been great. Sadly, our time's coming to an end. So I'd like you to take just a minute or two and share any parting remarks or comments or whatever you'd like to leave with our audience.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Matt, and thanks for having me on today. In sharing with the audience, I would say that I'm humbled that Matt would think that I'm a person who belongs on a show that you're calling Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things, because my life doesn't feel extraordinary to me in any way. If anything, it seems like a series of what I'll say, somewhat of an avalanche of unintended consequences that have led to what I'm doing right now. But what I say is, like, it doesn't matter what kind of fear or what kind of potential defeats in the future. The one thing I've learned after failing forward, I'll say, is that every time you get up stronger because you get up smarter. You know, every failure, every mistake, it makes you wiser to the next time. And what I found is that every single time that's happened, I've gotten back up stronger, and gotten back up even having more that I can share with other people and add significance into other people's lives in ways that I couldn't have had I not had that failure in the past. And I encourage anybody who's out there listening to that, who's questioning those same things or wondering, you know, why now, why me, whatever you want to say, like, because you don't know yet. But I guarantee you that there's bigger and better out there. Just keep moving in that direction.
That's great comment. I'm going to add to the show notes. It made me think of a blog post I wrote about Metcalfe's Law. We don't have time to explain it here, but I'll put it in the show notes and I'll send it to you right after we get off this call.
Oh, okay? Fun. Thank you.
Okay, so folks, if you can hear my voice and you are inspired by today's show, please donate what you can to WITV7, a 501c3 charitable nonprofit on a mission to educate, empower, and encourage, and they're doing a great job of it. Thank you, Mark. You're also doing super important work with your startup companies supporting American entrepreneurship. Love it. And your effort to make the Zona Plus a household name can ultimately improve the health and wellness of millions and millions of people all around the world. And that's a very good thing. Thank you, WITV7, for hosting and promoting our show so we can keep reaching ordinary people ready to create extraordinary lives. And thank you to our sponsors for the entire month of October, Zona Plus and Happy Living. Remember, folks, the more you buy, the more I'll donate. So tell your friends to buy a Zona Plus too. It's good for them. And most especially, thank you, viewers and listeners. You'll find links to websites and social media and all things Mark Young. Find him, friend him, buy his Zona Plus device. It's good for you. And it just may add years of healthy and happy living to your life. From me to you, dear friends, I love you and I want you to be happy. We do what we do here on the Something Significant show to inspire you to make the most out of your life, to believe as I do that a better self is always possible today and every day for the rest of our lives. Be bold. If you're dreaming about it, it's time to begin it. For it's on that path, the one to your dream, your unique and distinctive journey. That's where you'll find the way to make your exclamation mark of significance on the world. Till next time, I'm Matt Gersper. You are awesome, and this is the Something Significant show. And we're out.